Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm Ivan Calderon, and today I'm going to show you how to record drums using Impact XT and the PreSonus Atom in Studio One. Okay, so as most of you know, I've recently switched from using the Native Instruments Maschine over to the PreSonus Atom. I've done a whole review on the Atom, so if you want to check that out, I'm going to link it up top here. Now, to be clear, there's nothing against the Maschine. I've used it for many years and has served me well. I think it's a great piece of gear. However, the Atom just integrates so perfectly into my workflow since I already use Studio One. In any case, the switch did mean that I had to tweak my workflow just a little bit because I now had to learn Impact XT, which is Studio One's native drum sampler. I've been using this Impact and Atom combo for the past couple weeks, so today I want to show you how you too can use these two pieces of gear and software to start recording drums in Studio One. Before we get started, I do want to point out that you don't need the Atom to do what we're about to do. Obviously, if you have one that gives you more tactical control and allows you to play your parts in manually, but without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, so jumping into Studio One, the first thing you want to do, of course, if you have one, is to connect your Atom to your computer via USB. Now, once that's done, go ahead and load an instance of Impact, and as long as you're on the latest firmware update, these two should connect automatically. Now, the first thing you want to do before you even add any samples to this is to route each pad to the mixer. I get a lot of questions about how to do this, so today I'm going to show you how. Now, the first thing you want to do is decide how many drum samples or one-shots you are going to use. Now, for me personally, regardless of how many I end up using, I always account for 8. If I end up using all 8, then that's great, but if not, they're already loaded up and ready for me to use if I ever need them. Now, once you have that number in mind, whatever it might be for you, you're going to go up top here to this little arrow pointing to the right. This is the outputs button. You're going to click on that. Now, this is basically where you tell Studio One how many channels on your mixer you expect to use for each pad. As mentioned, I always do 8. You can do whatever you choose for yourself, but I'm going to check off the first 8. Now, once you do that and you open up the mixer, you'll notice that we now have 8 new channels that are linked now to this instance of Impact. Now, at this point, you're not done yet because all you've done is created the outputs. You still need to route each pad to those outputs, or in other words, you have to tell each pad where to send its sound. To route the pads to the channels, all you have to do is go in order from bottom left. So starting here, and then click the numbers on the bottom right of each pad and change them to match the channel that you want. So for example, this pad, I wanted to go to channel 1. That's already done. Let's go to the next pad. I'm gonna change this to channel 2, and then so on and so forth. So channel 3, channel 4, channel 5, channel 6, channel 7, and then finally, for me, channel 8. If you have more, then definitely keep going, but for me, this is where I end. Now, once you're at this point, you have one more thing you need to do before we add any samples, and that requires you to go to each and every single one of these pads that you're using and make sure that the one-shot button is clicked, that the choke is set to self, and that you turn off this little soft clipper thing on the filter section. Now, the reason for this is because obviously if you're recording drums, you're going to be using drum one-shots, so you need to tell the software, or Impact in this case, what you are going to be using. Now, the choke to self option is really important because basically what this means is that whenever you hit a pad twice or 2 pads in a row, the moment you trigger that second pad or that second sound or that sound again, it'll stop the first from playing. And this is important because it stops or prevents your sounds from overlapping and causing a whole bunch of mess. Now, last but not least, we have the soft clipper option here on the filter section. So soft clipping, what it basically is, it's akin to adding saturation and harmonics to make your sound pop, make them stand out a little bit more. Now, I personally always turn this off because it never does what it's supposed to do for me. Every time that I add it, it always adds this sort of like weird artifact to my sounds. So if I want saturation, if I want some sort of harmonics, I rather turn this off and then pick my favorite plugin and add it on the channel itself on the mixer. Obviously, that's just my recommendation. You're free to do whatever you need to do. But okay, once you have all that done and every single pad has these parameters in place, the next thing we need to do is to add some samples, and there's basically 3 ways to do that. Now, the first way to add samples is to go to the pad that you want to add that sound to, right click, hit add sample, and then find that WAV file on your computer. So for me, I have a whole hard drive dedicated to sounds. I can just go here and pick my favorite one. Let's go to a kick. And then once I hit open, it'll load it here. The second way to add samples is to first locate that WAV file on your computer and then simply just drag it over to whatever pad you want it on. So I'm gonna drop this one here, and now we have a snare. The last option to add samples to Impact is to open up your browser, head over to the Files tab, and then basically again just look for the wave sample in your computer and then drag it to wherever it needs to go. Now, once you have all these samples loaded up, go ahead and open up your mixer, and if everything was done correctly, you should be able to either click on a pad on Impact or tap on a pad on the Atom and not only be able to hear the sound, but also be able to see it on its respective channel on the mixer. So for example, now I'm tapping on the Atom. Now, once you have this down, from here is where you're gonna record or program your drums. So let me give you an example. Now, I just recorded these drums using my Atom, so I played them in myself. But if you don't have an Atom, all you have to do at this point is just double click anywhere here on the timeline where you have the instance of Impact, set it to however long you want to, double click to open, and then from here you can just start to place your notes wherever you want them to be. Now, once you've programmed or recorded your drums, they are going to all be in the same track on the same instance of Impact. Every individual sound is still routed to its channel on the mixer, but for now, all of these sounds on the timeline are still under one track. So to separate them into multi-tracks and have more control and isolation, what you want to do is go to that event, right click, go over to instrument parts, and then go to explode pitches to tracks. Now, basically the way this works is that on the Atom and on Impact, every single pad is designated or attached to a pitch on the piano roll. So for example, pad number 1 is set to C1, pad number 2 is set to C#1, pad 3 is set to D1, and so on and so forth. Now, when you record your drums, each sound, because it's attached to that pad, is going to be attached also to that pitch. So then once you use that explode the pitches function, each sound will be set on its own individual track, on its own individual pitch. From here, all you have to do really is just kind of name them whatever they are. So for me, that was kick, this was a closed hat, and this one was a snare. Finally, to drive this point home, they are still attached to the channels on the mixer. So if I play this now, I will still be able to manipulate the volume of each of these sounds individually. So check this out. Now, I do want to point out here that if you're more of a fan of using the step sequencer method to record your drums, much like you would in FL Studio, then a lot of this process is still the same. However, the exception arrives when it comes time to record your drums. Instead of recording straight into the Impact track here on the timeline, you would bring in a pattern event and then record here. To do that, go ahead and make sure you've clicked on the Impact track, then go over to the top, and under event, you're going to go down here where it says insert pattern. Now, assuming that you've already taken the time to route your Impact to the mixer and to add your samples, the moment you click on this pattern event, your sounds should already be here, loaded up, and ready to go. From here, obviously, all you have to do is just program your drums, much like how you would in any other step sequencer. So let me go ahead and just give you an example. So there you have it. Not only can you now record drums with the Impact and the Atom if you have one, but we've also managed to route each sound successfully to the mixer, which will give you more control when it comes time to mixing, and even split the sounds on the timeline based on pitch if you use that method. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, like this video if you liked, subscribe if you're not already, but I'll see you on the next one.